One of the ways I would describe Wallace Baumann as a Southern gentleman in the best sense of that word. He knew how to treat people, and he did treat people very well and very kindly.
Wallace Baumann may have been a Southern gentleman, but his Knoxville roots date back to his great-grandfather, Captain W. Woodruff, who first saw Knoxville as a Union soldier during the Civil War. What had made Knoxville desirable militarily to both sides during the Civil War was viewed by a war-weary Captain Woodruff as a key to his future.
I think it was his great-grandfather who started the store down on Gay Street that later became Woodruff's, and it was originally a livery stable, among other things, a hardware store.
What began as a small hardware store became a fixture of downtown Knoxville. Though tested by two disastrous fires early on, Woodruff survived and thrived. A burgeoning downtown Knoxville, the streets alive with shoppers, gave rise to a proliferation of theaters, the grandest of all being the Tennessee.
I was 6 years old, and my mother brought me to a movie, and she said an organ is going to rise out of the pit, and I just couldn't. I'd never seen so. I don't think I'd been to a theater. So we came during the movie, and the curtains came to, and the organ rose up, and I just was so excited I couldn't believe it. Well, it's always been my favorite place in Knoxville. And, you know, I remember so many wonderful movies I've seen and people I've seen, world premieres I've attended. All the way home was especially memorable. Robert Preston was here in person, and David Susskind, and that was an exciting thing to go to the preliminary reception for all of those people beforehand. We even got to watch some of it being filmed right here in Knoxville. And I remember that when Robert Preston was recognized, the organist played 76 trombones because he just appeared in The Music Man.
Even during World War II, while crossing the Siegfried Line, Wallace thought of the Tennessee, where he'd first heard of the Siegfried Line watching newsreels. Perhaps Wallace's appreciation of the grandeur of the Tennessee Theater came from his father, A.B. Baumann, who belonged to a line of great architects. Examples of their grand buildings still stand around downtown Knoxville. Architecture didn't call Wallace, but the family business did.
Wallace was a very astute business person. In his later years, he was president of Woodruff's, and he was the buyer. He went to New York and other places and bought the very fine products that were sold in Woodruff's.
I remember the big bicycle, the one with the big front wheel. We actually used that at Woodruff's to do a commercial. One of our salesmen rode that through the streets of Knoxville, dressed in period attire many years ago, probably back in the 60s or 70s. And that got a lot of good attention. He donated that bicycle to the History Center.
I remember downtown Knoxville in the old days, and Woodruff's department store was considered, and it was, one of the finest department stores in Knoxville. They had just a wide range of furniture, china, cooking utensils. And Wallace was president of Woodruff's when the decision was made to close the downtown Gay Street store.
Time and the exodus from downtown would ultimately doom the Tennessee Theater, and then Woodruff's.
He tried to hold on to downtown as long as he could. I mean, that was the benchmark, the store that survived the two fires, and you know, the one where his great-grandfather founded Woodruff's way back when, and you know, the sentimental value was tremendous, and he tried, but it just downtown at that point was not feasible to keep that business open.
The abandonment of downtown by shoppers was just one of many changes to Knoxville, change that had already affected Wallace's old neighborhood.
We remember very well the house on Melrose, which is still there. I was 12 years old when my grandmother had to sell that house. But I was just old enough to remember the family gatherings there at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And what a great place it was, big, wonderful house. And you know, the stories of the neighborhood, of course the University of Tennessee when it was much smaller, and things have changed so much there. But he loved to talk about the old days, and some of the streets that now had different names, like Andy Holt and Volunteer Boulevard, he would always use the previous names, always. That was his thing. It used to be Temple Avenue. He would punctuate that. He was very, very much a child of his past, but you know, he still lived in the present, but you know, he loved where he came from. He loved his roots, loved this city.
That love of this city and respect for the past led to his involvement with the restoration of the Tennessee.
Nobody's ever going to design a beautiful, opulent building like this ever again. The buildings like this will never be built again, so we want to maintain and keep the grandeur that we've had.
Although Wallace was not an architect by profession, he certainly had very strong architectural instincts, and he was an invaluable resource when we were planning the restoration of the Tennessee Theater.
Wallace gave much more than his time and knowledge during the restoration.
He came to me and said, "Bill, I want you to find the best theater organ craftsman in the country. We're going to rebuild the Wurlitzer organ at the Tennessee Theater." And he said, "The cost is not an issue. You find the best person in the country to rebuild our organ." And that's what happened. And the restoration of the organ cost $80,000, and Wallace Baumann took care of that very generously. And it's really one of the finest theater organ installations to be found in the country. Wallace was a very generous person, not only to the Tennessee Theater, but to other philanthropies. I know he was a very generous supporter of the Knoxville Symphony. He was on the board of the Knoxville Symphony for several years. And there were other charitable and philanthropic organizations that he supported.
Needless to say, we miss him terribly. He's been gone for a little over 2 years now, but not just the fact that our family gatherings are not the same without him, the fact that he was our go-to person, if you will, for anything regarding family history. He would know it. So all we had to do was ask him, and we don't have that anymore, and that's just another loss to us. Very, very, very proud of our roots in this city, that's for sure. Both the Baumann and the Woodruff side have just done so much architecturally, and of course Wallace with the Tennessee Theater.
Wallace Baumann would surely smile at the current revival of downtown Knoxville that coincided with the resurgence of its theaters.
It's a magic time and a magic place.
Once again, light plays across the stage and screen of the magnificent Tennessee, igniting dreams and imaginations, thanks in large measure to that youngster who watched his first movie there so long ago.